The architects of the unimaginable, the epic and secret battle for the American West's water, and the men who drowned a valley to quench a city's thirst. It began, as all great American stories do, with an audacious dream and a colossal thirst. The place was Los Angeles, California, at the turn of the 20th century, a sun-baked, dusty, and ambitious town where the scent of jasmine fought a losing battle against the grit of the desert. The city's population was exploding, but its lifeblood, water, was running dry. LA was a desert anomaly, on the verge of becoming a ghost town unless someone could conjure a river out of the mountains. This is the true, astounding, and deeply controversial tale of that conjuring. A historical saga stretching across decades and hundreds of miles of unforgiving terrain involving political schemes, subterranean violence, economic ruin, and the tragic destruction of a prosperous, idyllic community that stood in the city's way. It is the story of the Los Angeles aqueduct, an engineering marvel that birthed modern Southern California, but at the cost of one of the greatest betrayals in American history. The Owens Valley Water Wars. Part 1. The Thirst and the Whisper. The chief architect of this monumental plan was William Mulholland, a self-taught civil engineer of prodigious skill and iron will. An Irish immigrant who started as a ditch digger for the local water company, Mulholland saw the future of Los Angeles not in its oil fields or its nascent movie studios, but in the distant, snow-fed rivers of the Sierra Nevada mountains. He saw the Owens River, 233 miles away, and knew its water was LA's destiny. But Mulholland was a practical engineer, not a master politician. For the scheme to succeed, he needed a man who could move mountains of opposition and millions of dollars with equal ease. He found his partner in Fred Eaton, a former mayor of LA and an influential figure in California politics, a man whose easy charm and shadowy connections masked a ruthless ambition. The whispered conspiracy began around 1904. While the public debated local solutions, Eaton and Mulholland were already operating in secret. Eaton, under the pretense of being a wealthy cattle rancher looking to buy land, traveled to the remote, fertile Owens Valley, a community nestled between two mountain ranges that had transformed the desert into a little Eden. The valley was a paradise of fruit orchards, alfalfa fields, and thriving small towns like Independence and Bishop, all sustained by the very river LA coveted. Eaton's mission was twofold: to buy up the water rights and the crucial right-of-way for the massive canal and pipelines before anyone in the valley understood the true scale of his operation. Using dummy corporations, straw buyers, and outright deception, Eaton began acquiring land along the Owens River, often purchasing ranching land at inflated prices that masked the true value he sought, the water beneath. The local farmers, seeing a generous city millionaire interested in land development, were initially happy to sell. They were completely unaware that they were selling the very foundation of their community. The information was compartmentalized and kept under an iron grip. Crucially, two federal officials became key and unwitting accomplices: Joseph B. Lippincott, a supervising engineer for the U.S. Reclamation Service, which controlled federal irrigation projects, and President Theodore the Press Roosevelt himself. Lippincott, who was supposed to be helping the Owens Valley locals establish their own federal irrigation project, was secretly working for the city of Los Angeles. He steered the local water board towards a system that LA could later exploit, and then, using his federal authority, effectively blocked the Owens Valley residents from securing their own federal water contracts, leaving the door open for Eaton. When the plan was finally presented to the LA public in 1905, it was framed as an existential necessity, a heroic gamble to save the city from ruin. Mulholland gave his famous, emotionally charged pitch, declaring that the aqueduct was the only way to ensure LA's future prosperity. He made no mention of the massive irrigation projects that had already drained LA's existing supply for private development, nor did he mention the Owens Valley's pending doom. The public, fearful of the looming water shortage, a shortage expertly exaggerated by LA's powerful newspapers, voted overwhelmingly to approve a $24.5 million bond issue, the largest municipal bond in American history at the time. The money was secured. The plan was set in motion. The fate of the Owens Valley was sealed, though its residents wouldn't realize it for years.
Part 2. The construction of the Leviathan. The Los Angeles aqueduct was a feat of Roman-scale engineering in the American West. Mulholland and his team faced a monumental task to divert the Owens River and send its water flowing downhill for 233 miles across the Mojave Desert and through multiple mountain ranges, all by gravity alone. It was a dizzying mix of siphons, tunnels, canals, and concrete conduits. Construction began in 1908. Thousands of men, mostly Mexican, Native American, and immigrant laborers were hired, turning the remote desert into a buzzing hive of industrial activity. The work was brutal, dangerous, and poorly compensated, conducted in scorching heat and freezing cold. Tunnels and siphons. Over 140 miles of the aqueduct were either pipe or covered concrete conduit, including 43 miles of solid rock tunnels blasted through the mountains. The most famous was the massive Jawbone Canyon siphon, a series of steel pipes so huge they dwarfed the men who built them, designed to carry the water up one side of a canyon and down the other, utilizing a stunning principle of physics. The Inyo earthquake. The project was briefly halted by a powerful earthquake in 1909 that devastated parts of the Owens Valley. Ironically, the geological surveys done by Mulholland's team, which confirmed the water supply, had completely downplayed the seismic instability of the region. The aqueduct was hastily redesigned in parts, only increasing its cost and the frantic pace of its construction. The power scheme. Crucially, the aqueduct was also designed to be a massive hydroelectric power generator. The water's steep descent from the Sierra Nevada into the LA basin provided a perfect opportunity for a series of power plants. This hidden benefit was key to the project's financial feasibility, but it also masked the primary motivation of LA's power brokers: speculation. Behind the scenes, the story was not one of saving a city, but of immense personal fortunes being made. Fred Eaton, despite his supposed service to the city, bought up crucial private land around the Owens River headwaters, using the city's water to irrigate his property, even as he orchestrated the removal of water from the public. His betrayal was not just a historical tragedy, but a massive financial double-cross. Other LA insiders quietly bought up land in the desolate San Fernando Valley, knowing that once the aqueduct was completed and brought water to their otherwise worthless scrubland, they would become millionaires overnight. The aqueduct wasn't just about drinking water, it was an engine of private wealth.
Part 3. The Drowning of Eden. By 1913, the monumental aqueduct was finished. On November 5, 1913, William Mulholland stood before a massive crowd in the San Fernando Valley to witness the arrival of the first torrent of Owens River water. As the ribbon of water erupted from the spillway, Mulholland delivered his second, even more famous and ultimately chilling line. "There it is. Take it." For Los Angeles, it was a day of triumph and rebirth. The city's footprint expanded exponentially. Water that had once sustained the orchards of the Owens Valley now fed the swimming pools and avocado groves of the new millionaires in the San Fernando Valley. But in the Owens Valley, the tragedy was just beginning. The initial diversion was partial, but as LA's population continued to boom, the demand became insatiable. LA systematically bought up the remaining water rights, and soon the vital streams that fed the farms and reservoirs of the valley were rerouted into Mulholland's concrete channel. The formerly lush valley began to wither. Rivers shrank, lakes vanished, and the dust storms became chronic. The most symbolic tragedy was the fate of Owens Lake, a vast, shimmering inland sea at the south end of the valley. By 1926, the lake was completely dry, replaced by a massive, toxic alkali dust flat, the largest single source of particulate air pollution in the United States today, a permanent scar of the aqueduct's success. The valley residents, initially complacent, realized the depth of the betrayal. Their orchards died, their cattle starved, and their small towns began to empty. They were now a colony of LA, doomed to wither for the prosperity of a distant metropolis. The realization sparked the Owens Valley Water Wars, a remarkable period of civic resistance and low-grade sabotage. The dynamite and the dam. Unable to fight the financial and political machine of LA, the valley residents turned to direct action. Beginning in 1924, a group of farmers and businessmen, led by figures like former Sheriff W. W. Watterson, began systematically blowing up sections of the aqueduct. These acts of sabotage were not just destructive, they were desperate political statements. The Alabama Gate Incident, the most famous act of rebellion, occurred in November 1924. A group of enraged ranchers and farmers seized the Alabama Gates, a crucial control point on the aqueduct near Lone Pine, and used sandbags to divert the water back into the original, empty channel of the Owens River. They held the gates for 5 days, demanding that LA negotiate fair compensation and a future water share for the valley. The siege became a national story, shining an embarrassing light on LA's land grab. The LA's response was swift and brutal. They deployed armed guards, Pinkertons, and later the LA Police Department's Special Detective Force, turning the valley into a low-grade military zone. The city also used its vast financial resources to simply buy out the remaining land and water rights, bankrupting banks and forcing the most stubborn resistors into selling their condemned properties. By the late 1920s, the resistance was broken. The city of Los Angeles became the largest single landowner in Inyo County, owning over 95% of the water rights and a massive portion of the land. The prosperous agricultural valley was reduced to a desolate hinterland, its story rewritten as a necessary sacrifice for the glorious rise of Southern California.
Part 4. The Inevitable Reckoning. The epic story of the aqueduct would not be complete without a dramatic, almost biblical reckoning for its chief architect. On March 12, 1928, a catastrophe occurred that permanently stained Mulholland's legacy and exposed the hubris of the entire project: the St. Francis Dam disaster. Mulholland, having proven his genius by building the aqueduct, had designed and overseen the construction of the St. Francis Dam in San Francisco Canyon, north of the San Fernando Valley, meant to serve as a massive reservoir for the newly delivered Owens River water. Just minutes before midnight, the dam failed catastrophically. A 120-foot wall of water, 12.4 billion gallons strong, tore through the canyon, washing away entire construction camps, farms, bridges, and homes, roaring through the valleys toward the Pacific Ocean. The scale of the destruction was immense, the sound of the flood a primal, terrifying roar, heard for miles. The death toll was officially placed at 431, but the true number is widely believed to be higher, with entire families and transient workers completely lost without a trace. It remains the second worst disaster in California history after the 1906 San Francisco earthquake and fire. The subsequent official inquiry found that the disaster was caused by Mulholland's flawed geological assessment and structural design, specifically his failure to recognize the inherent instability of the rock formations upon which the dam's abutments were built. William Mulholland, the genius who had saved Los Angeles, was heartbroken and publicly humiliated.
Testifying at the coroner's inquest, he took full responsibility, uttering a final tragic line that echoes the entire saga of the aqueduct. "I envy the dead." He retired in disgrace shortly thereafter, the shadow of the 400-plus victims forever eclipsing his triumph. The dam disaster provided a grim final chapter to the story of the aqueduct, a project built on deception, powered by ambition, and ultimately haunted by death and destruction, both slow in the Owens Valley and sudden in the St. Francis Canyon. Epilogue: The Legacy of Thirst. Today, the Owens Valley remains a dramatic, beautiful, and profoundly wounded place. The dry Owens Lake is a source of bitter irony and a continuous multi-billion-dollar environmental cleanup effort by the city of Los Angeles to mitigate the dust pollution. The land is largely owned and controlled by LA's Department of Water and Power, or DWP, which still draws the vast majority of its water from the distant north, supplemented by a second aqueduct built decades later. The legacy is a complex and contradictory one. The aqueduct is undeniably the single most important infrastructure project in the history of Los Angeles, the ultimate enabler of the American West's second-largest city, a technological marvel that fueled the growth of Southern California, including the birth of the massive defense and entertainment industries that define it today. But it is also a cautionary tale about unchecked municipal power, the betrayal of an idyllic community, and the devastating environmental cost of one city's colossal thirst. The story of the Los Angeles Aqueduct is not just a triumph of engineering, it is a profound historical document of the American spirit. A spirit capable of unimaginable innovation and ruthless destruction in equal measure. The concrete structure stands as a monument to both genius and theft, a perpetual reminder that the lifeblood of one community was sacrificed to feed the extraordinary, world-changing dream of another.